Okay, folks, it's time to get started. Welcome tonight to our Squirrel Hunting 101 webinar. I'm Dee James, Hunter Engagement Coordinator and with the Wildlife Commission. And tonight we'll be sharing the stage with Rupert Medford, our District 6 wildlife biologist, and Master Officer Eric Gleason. So thanks for joining us, and we'll get to our webinar rules of engagement here in a second. So obviously, as with the hunting and processing webinars, if you were able to attend, it is 1 hour. They are recorded and will be distributed, but not by March 1st, probably in 2 weeks. That must have been from an old webinar. It is we will have a question and answer session, 30 minutes immediately following. And we ask that you write your questions in writing. It must be topic specific, and they will be addressed at the Q&A, so not beforehand. Chat hand raising may be monitored, but that's only if something's pertinent. Otherwise, we try to avoid that and not have the questions being answered ahead of time, and allow us to cover the material before asking questions, because a lot of time questions that come up are things that we're about to cover. We'll try to give us towards the end. As you see, there's no talking heads. We want people focusing on the content and not on the speakers. So obviously, as with the other webinars, and I'll be brief with this, but our programming purpose, as I've said before many times, a state wildlife agency is tasked with doing science-based research and whatever it does, whether wildlife or with people in the the social sciences. And this is a 5-year survey done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey. And hunters overall have been nationwide on a precipitous decline. Greatest population was between 1975 1980, and that's participating hunters, about 17.1 million roughly, and that's age 16 and older. Roughly 8%, 8 to 10% of the population hunted, and we got to this low of 11.5 million, roughly 4 to 5% of the overall population in 2016. There's a 2021 report's supposed to be coming out, but it's been delayed. So the point is, hunter numbers have been declining. If you look at North Carolina, license holders continue to be on an upward trend, but hunting participation is less than half. So as you can see there, we're almost 700,000 license holders in 2021 as compared to roughly 300,000 participating hunters, active engaged hunters. Well, one of the things that really concerns me as the hunter engagement coordinator is this group of the baby boomer generation, as I like to call the greatest number of modern day North American hunters of all time, is fastly fading out. And it was a huge cohort. It's going to leave a big gap, because you can see roughly by the age of about 63, where I'm pretty much at now, we start dropping off. And they're not going to be replaced like they once were. They are not being replaced. And right now, this is one of the reasons for the programming. So obviously, if you look at participating hunters and license holders in comparison to the entire population of the state, it does make our group look pretty low. In fact, throwing the numbers out there, in 2021, as you already heard, about 300,000 participated in hunting as compared to 10.6 million people in the population. So we represent 2.9% of the population overall. And as you remember, I said at one time it was 8 to 10% of the population, and there for a while 4 to 5. So it continues to go down. So stabilization in the state is a good thing. And it's not only about something that we care about very near and dear, the harvesting of our own food, but also it does play a role in funding for conservation. It has largely been the funding model and may never be replaced as it once was, but state agencies are looking at this. So anyway, again, as many of you know, I'm involved in the hunting webinars and the GSO hunting workshops. Webinars for all experience levels, and that's obviously what we're doing tonight. It's very easy to take a deer hunter and make a turkey hunter out of them, or a squirrel hunter and make a deer hunter or a turkey hunter out of them with a webinar. They already know the basics. GSOs are for those that did not grow up in hunting families, have very minimal experience, have no social support, and are for that particular group. Both of these are experiments to offset participation decline. Only time will tell whether they work. So trying to promote both landowner opportunities to host GSO workshops, because they are in-person events, or even hunters to assist at those, and webinars as well. We're constantly promoting, because I'm basically a one-man band. And although this is a WRC facilitated event, many of them are volunteer facilitated, so we can always use help. So if you're interested in becoming a webinar and/or GSO volunteer, this is on our website. You can find that volunteer link, or you can reach out to me directly, and we're always looking for people to assist. These are the remaining GSO and virtual webinars. If you're interested in any of these, and as I said, the hunting webinars are for all skill levels, GSO is for that specific audience, and there are the requirements noted. If you want those links, just email me at gso@ncwildlife.org. That's my alias, and I'll send them to you, unless maybe you're already signed up for some, but if you're not aware of them, drop me an email and I'll send you those links. Starting with squirrel hunting physiology and biology. I always said, whether it be a GSO or a webinar or the old in-person seminars, there always starts with a biology about the animals. The more you know about the animal, the better you'll be able to hunt them, the more successful you'll be. And as I also say, these animals are not simply targets for our amusement. We care about this species, and it's not just about hunting, it's for the enjoyment and the well-being and the thriving of these species as well. So to start out with, you already know here, there's 5 types of squirrels in North Carolina, what we refer to as the common gray, the fox, usually in multiple color variations, the red or pine squirrel, and of course, flying squirrels, 2 species, but they are not hunted. I'm just mentioning them here, and I will again very briefly. A little bit about them, obviously length up to 20 inches, weight up to 25. You can see all the food that they eat. They mostly are vegetarians, but as you can see, insects, bird eggs, even young birds, they're definitely opportunists. Breeding 2 litters annually, and you can see during the mating times, usually late in the winter, earlier later, young born February, March, even June and August, produce 1 to 8 young, most often 2 to 4. Life expectancy, 25% survival the first year, then 50% thereafter. They are a prey species. Few survive a little bit longer in the wild, as you can see, and you can see all the forms of mortality. There's always something wanting to have a squirrel dinner. See, the range graze throughout the state. And even when looking at the United States as a whole, it's kind of an eastern and even up into the north there, squirrel, but very common. Fox squirrel, a little bit bigger, 26 inches, over 2.5 pounds. Similar in all food, including pine seeds. 2 litters again, mating around the same times. Young born typically during the same time, producing a little bit less of young, and they're less precocial, meaning they need more care than grays. Humans are definitely less precocial. We need a lot of care when we're babies. Life expectancy 3 to 4, as you can see, 6 to 7 in the wild, up to 20 in captivity. And mortality, I found limited data with these, and I think primarily because they are a solitary, more recluse type of a squirrel and lower densities. And as you can see, the fox squirrel, a little bit different range in North Carolina, mostly to the east and northwest, and similar to the squirrel, the gray squirrel, and in overall in the US. The red is, of course, the smaller one, 14 inches, 8.8 ounces, much smaller. Same type of foods, even a little bit more in the berries there and the pine seeds as well. 3 to 5 in the breeding, number of young around the same time, and potentially summer with them. Young 2 to 4, also less precocial, need more care early on. Life expectancy 3 to 5 up to 10. You can see all the things that want to have a red squirrel meal. And the unique thing about them too is a small, very territorial and aggressive. They have this very unique long rattling buzz sound toward intruders. And when you hear the regular gray, obviously the we're used to seeing the gray. When you hear that sound, you won't forget it. It's pretty unique. And of course, if you want to Google, you can find anything, Google red squirrel buzzing sound, and you'll hear what it sounds like. And you can see there the range. I mean, not so many in the east. It mostly is a pine squirrel, as they're called, and definitely in looking in the US all the way up into Canada, you can see its range. It's a cute little squirrel too. So with the flying squirrels, obviously not hunted, are non-game, and just to share the locations, you can see where they're abundant and where they're not abundant. And if you're ever deer hunting and you see something flying through the air and it looks like it sticks to the tree, that's probably a flying squirrel. I've seen them many times in the dark. They are definitely a nocturnal species. Very neat to watch. So just so you know, but do not shoot them. They are the wealthiest of animals because they have both a winter and a summer home. You can see what it looks like. And so obviously that's where you're going to find them when you're in the woods. The common behaviors with squirrels, they are crepuscular, similar to deer, dawn and dusk, and are very much omnivorous. And I mention that again because I once saw, I was at main campus, Penn State, while I was a somewhat older student, watch a squirrel jump in a garbage can, pull out a chicken leg, climb up on top of the can and start eating it. So whatever's available, they will eat. They are tree acrobats. They are double jointed. That's why they're so easily able to fly from limb to limb and climb both up and down with the same amount of speed. As you noticed in the previous picture, nest builders, tree cavity dwellers, and usually use the nest as the summer homes, and tree cavities more to the winter, a little bit more insulation. They are weather influenced, real cold, brutal days like when we don't like to go out, neither do they. And they are active on drizzly days. In fact, you can find them out there if it's a light, misty rain. There's just something about it. They do bury and cache food. They're hoarders, and they'll sometimes forget where they put acorns in the tree, which sometimes will turn into trees. So they're kind of arborists. They are territorial, especially the reds. Reds don't want any other squirrels around. The foxes are reclusive. You don't see them that often. I've seen them a few times, and of course they are a little bit more rare. Very vocal. You will hear them. They do zigzag to escape strategy. Again, being a prey species, a lot of avian predators go after them, of course, too, even when they're in the trees. So that's not a total escape. And as I like to say, they are a nervous wreck. They're a species that's always on the move. So meaning it's hard to get a shot at sometimes. They are very vocal, and I've seen an array of calls out there, that quicks and yaks and clumps and just things that didn't make sense. So I stuck to the ones that they put on squirrel calls, and it's basically barks, chatters, and you can see why they're doing it, whines, whistle, squeals that are usually about distress or injury, of warning other squirrels. And of course, there's friction calls too, like cutting. So anything that sounds like they're chewing on a nut can actually attract the squirrel. So these calls sometimes do work, but I kind of put them in the same category as deer calls. Deer calls sometimes work, deer calls sometimes don't. And I think the calling animals that we hunt are more likely turkeys and waterfowl as compared to them. But hey, sometimes works. The most I learned about squirrel calling came from these 2 VHS tapes. I was more or less a sit and watch, as you'll find out, squirrel hunter, but they had some really interesting things in here. And so lots of videos out there on that World Wide Web that I never had growing up. So you can find out a lot more. And if you can find these two, go to eBay. You might be able to find those two VHS tapes. They're pretty good. They do have inflictions, not unlike any other species, and obviously the bot fly that gets in under their skin and grows and lives and survives and then gets out before the first frost, commonly known as warbles, foothills, and wolves, doesn't hurt the meat. You don't have to worry about eating the squirrel, but it's just pretty nasty looking. I've personally never encountered it on a squirrel I've taken, but it does happen. Then obviously the pox, fibratomus virus, often from fleas or mosquitoes. It's like a little fibroma. Again, doesn't hurt the meat. not an issue. I think I might have had one squirrel in my lifetime that had a little tiny one, but I did read that if the tumors make it to the interior, then it's probably not, you know, if it's on the organs or something like that, then you probably shouldn't eat it. Obviously, you can see a list of the spring, summer, fall, winter foods. So they're basically like us, you know, fresh fruit in the summer and, you know, breads and meat in the winter. And for them, it's just mostly acorns during those fall, spring, winter months, and then obviously whatever's available during the other times. Number one, and I say this for deer hunting too, go nuts early this fall. The best thing you can do is get out in the woods, looking around for a mass crop. And then once you find it, that's where squirrels are going to be. And some of the ways I do that right there, I say, seek out hardwood forest in Google Map. For those of you that use Google Map or Google Earth, it's a good way to get an over the land view. Like if you don't have a drone, an over the land view of the ground, and you can see where the pine forests are, and you can see where hardwoods are interspersed within. And that's a good way to get out there and look for that. This is not preferred squirrel habitat. They may move through here. They may even have a nest nearby if there's some hardwoods, but it's not really a producer of the primary foods. Maybe some seeds with cones for some, but not the best. Hardwoods is what you're looking for. Mass crop, white oaks, red oaks, chestnut oaks. Those are the things you want to look for. And obviously in the undulating topography, which I tend to prefer, also more hardwoods, and you can actually get some good long shots from an opposite side of the valley in some of these areas. So here's a way too, when I'm looking at the Google map, you know, you're up there, you can see where the pine forests are. It's a really green monoculture, straight lines. And oftentimes if you're driving like that dirt road, you know, hunters will drive by and they'll say, this is all pines, I'm not going to stop here. But yet sometimes you walk a little bit of a distance and there's like a bottom land or a stream bed forest of hardwoods that can provide excellent squirrel habitat. So that's what you want to look for, and look for the acorns. Where to hunt, and this was something I debated on whether to put in here. I'm going to move through it pretty quick. We put it in the hunting, deer hunting and processing, but people typically ask where to hunt. I can provide these slides if you want them after the fact. But again, just to run through a quick of the public lands. Obviously, in my days of yore, a trip to Alabama I made one time for turkey encountered a gazetteer and a road atlas, and I marked down the way all the way from Pennsylvania to Alabama. You don't have to do that anymore. You have navigation apps, and you can start right at our website, and both the Inland Hunting, Fishing, Trapping Digest, or as I like to say, the old Prego spaghetti sauce slogan, it's in there. Everything you need to know is either online or in that Regulations Digest, and always let your fingers do the walking first before you go hunting. We don't keep lists of private property. I will mention it briefly in that if you're thinking about it and you want to knock on some doors, that's great. But do it during the off season. You know, don't walk there with your firearm or bow like you're going to be able to hunt the day that you meet someone. Do it during the off season. Respect their time. Don't be long-winded. Offer incentives, chores, or maintenance on the property. Sometimes a landowner will allow you access if you say, hey, I'll help you out. What do you need me to do? Respect the property and others. Don't expect permanent access. Be sure to reach out every year. And nowadays, because we live in a litigious world, consider liability insurance. If you have your own liability insurance and a simple Google, hunter liability insurance, that can sometimes be the difference. You can try it. So obviously going to hunting on the black bar and all those drop downs, and now we even have boxes below that help direct people before the hunt, what to hunt, where to shoot and hunt. The Game Lands interactive map and the viewable and downloadable geo-reference PDF maps are some of my favorites. So if you're looking at the map, all those diamonds are game lands. And you can also see there, because now we're also doing the CWD studies, you have the center core primary surveillance areas and outer secondary. It's primarily focused on deer, but now you know what it means. And obviously that means no CWD. If you're a deer hunter, make sure you look over this. And I probably already mentioned it. Well, I did already mention it to you during the deer hunting, deer processing webinars. So you zoom out, you can see it a little bit better when you change the base map. get up closer, you can see the topography, or happens to be Uwharrie. And with those mountain region PDF maps, one of the first places I went to hunt turkeys was Buffalo Cove. I clicked on it. I got the PDF. You can see where the parking areas are. You can see where camping areas are. And typically our boundaries, you can see it as a diamond and two orange reddish bands. And I will say a disclaimer there, sometimes on the property, the trees will go down and you may not have it. Somebody tears a sign down, but if you have navigation apps like we have today that you're going to see in a second, and you're especially loading one in Avenza with this, you will find our boundary. So there's no excuse to be trespassing today. Avenza is one that I use. Again, you can download that georeference PDF. You basically have a GPS on that game lands. And this one by far is the most popular now. It shows private land, it shows the public land, everything else. Nearly every hunter I talk to likes onX, so it's available. Permit hunting opportunities are on game lands, some specific game lands, not all, that offer a less populated hunt, especially for game lands that have been really popular. They are by application, and there is a drawing period, although some are over the counter. There's an example of bear. The deadline was 9/1, and that's something you want to take a look at. And there's ones for small game as well. So some tips I have with the public land: fingers first, interactive map and georeference PDF, study the topography, Google Earth, print out those PDFs. I like to carry them. I still like a map. Download Avenza or onX Hunt, put the boots on the ground after you do all of that preseason, and adhere to the borders, as I mentioned. And you'll be good on public land. No matter what state you go, each state would have its own mapping opportunities. As I say, with hunting public land or anywhere, and I'm a public land hunter, the spoils of hunting go to the unwavering, persistent, and the rest go to the supermarket. It's like anything else in life. What you put into it is what you'll get out of it. Some laws and regs briefly: keep it safe, legal, and ethical. That's what we want to do. You can see the squirrel hunting laws and regs. That's on page 69. And as I say, if you don't have a Regs Digest, get it, and you'll be able to look at this. And I often tell folks, take it to the restroom. You got to go there anyway. So red and gray, October 16th, February 29th. Gray, statewide private lands only, May 13th to 27. It's a relatively new season. Fox, October 16th to 31. Gray and red, limit 8. No possession, season limit. Fox, daily limit 1 and 2 possession, season 10. No fully auto firearms, no shotguns larger than 10. Unlawful to shoot into a squirrel's nest. Once he's in there, he's safe. Unlawful to hunt with that precision any shotgun shell containing lead or toxic while hunting on any posted waterfowl impoundment on any game land, except shotgun shells containing lead buckshot may be used while deer hunting. So if you're on a posted waterfowl impoundment, no lead, period. It has to be non-toxic. Hunter orange is required when using firearms. Cap or outer garment must be visible from all sides. Obviously, with the new spring season, it's kind of a test pilot right now. Don't know whether it's going to transfer to public, but harvest mortality is typically compensatory, so there's no worry for overharvest, and this is already being done in other states. Obviously, reduced competition for food can lead to larger squirrels, higher survival rates. Mast failure, however, is linked to declines in squirrels. Squirrel small game hunting participation remains low. If you look at that chart, usually once people start deer hunting, waterfowl hunting, turkey hunting, squirrel hunting goes away. I don't hunt it like I used to either. And obviously the hope is it might also benefit R3 and help increase hunter participation. What to look for: hunting strategies, hunting calls, hunting equipment, brief processing, overview. Now we're getting into some of the stuff. Things to listen, look for: rustling, digging, bark scratching, nut cutting, nuts dropping, limb shaking, distress intrusion calls. There's a lot of noise going on in there, so you want to tune yourself to it. So watch for those limbs, listen for those sounds. Primary tactics: stationary. You're basically standing still in one spot waiting for the squirrel, just like a deer hunt. I combine spot, stalk, still hunting because it's very similar. Still hunting is a term used in the West, but you're basically moving, looking with a pair of binoculars, moving again, stopping, looking with a pair of binoculars. And then if you do hear a squirrel in the distance, you're trying to close that distance between you and that squirrel. I usually don't do that. I make too much noise and I walk too fast, just like I talk too fast. So if you're a slower moving person, that might work for you. Calls and calls with limb shaking, especially with a squirrel whistle. That's a distress call. And then shaking limbs can be effective. Hunting with dogs, as Rupert's going to introduce you to. I've never done it. Hat stick maneuver, it's a universal tactic. And basically what you're trying to do is put that squirrel, well, let's put it this way. That squirrel's going to try to put a tree between you and it. And sometimes if you walk up to that tree and a squirrel goes around the other side, by taking a hat or a stick and throwing it on the other side, not your orange hat, that would be illegal. That can cause him to just come around quick enough that you can get off a shot. And obviously crow hawk calls to elicit cautious curiosity, because they're both prey species, predator species of the squirrel. And putting harvested squirrels into memory is when you basically sit down, you shoot a squirrel, and you don't jump up to retrieve it right away. And some hunters don't do that. You don't have to not do that, but some hunters don't do it, because then if there's any other squirrels in the area, they're alarmed. They're alarmed to your movement because you're getting up. Unlike when you're staying in the tree stand when you shoot a deer. And wind the gut, some do it right away, some wait till they pick them up later. It's not like a deer where there's a sense of urgency in gutting. So I'm going to get a break here. The second, Rupert's going to cover squirrels with dogs. Rupert, feel free to take it away when you are ready.
All right. Good evening, folks. As Deet said, I'm the District 6 wildlife biologist, and I've been with the Wildlife Commission for about 17 years, but I've been squirrel hunting a lot longer. And it's something I'm passionate about. And for me, squirrel hunting is kind of like getting back to the basics. It's not quite as intensive as, say, deer hunting or bear hunting. And it's family fun time. And with a dog, I think it just adds to the sort of social aspect of it. And so I'm going to talk briefly about it. My goal is not to convince people that don't hunt with dogs to hunt with dogs. It's a personal choice. And I would say that largely it just depends on your personality as to whether or not you're a dog person. Certainly they can be hunted effectively both ways. But quickly, as far as how it's done, I'm going to start in my example with a trained dog. You can buy a trained dog. You take your dog out, you turn it loose, and the dog typically will use its sense of smell, but sometimes sight and sound, and it will tree the squirrels. It will run them up a tree, and it will bark there until the hunter can come to the tree and shoot the squirrel out and add it to his or her bag limit. Now, the training of a squirrel dog is a whole nother topic unto itself. But I will say just briefly, if you can teach a dog to come and to sit and stay, then you can train a squirrel dog. And largely it has to do with just exposing them to squirrels and giving them positive reinforcement when they do right. As far as the way that the hunt goes, I described it briefly, but I do want to point a couple things out. As Deep mentioned, when a squirrel gets in a nest, it's safe. And so for that particular squirrel, if it goes into a nest or a hole in a tree, a den tree, we call it, the hunt is over. And because you're shooting up, you always want to, be extra cautious with firearm safety, in particular with 22 caliber rifles. With shotguns, it's less of an ordeal, but you can see in some of these pictures, and when you think about just shooting up, launching a projectile up into the air, you want to be ultra cautious about that and be aware of your backstop with a 22. As far as the types of dogs, you'll see a list there of breeds that are among the most common. But let me just tell you, you could really use any type of dog. Most dogs, they hate a squirrel. They like to chase a squirrel and bark at a squirrel. And if you already have a dog that will do that, then you have a dog that at least has the potential of being a squirrel dog. Now, certainly the most common are Feist and Curs, but I know lots of guys that have hounds. And in fact, one of the guys I went to college with, he said the best squirrel dog he ever had was a chow chow that he had actually gotten from the pound. So you can really use just about any type of dog. When it comes to gear, I don't get real carried away. I want to be comfortable, but you really can wear everyday clothes when you're hunting with a dog. And the reason is that the dog is barking and it's making that squirrel tense up and hold tight. So you don't have to wear camouflage. Certainly, many of the modern camouflage companies have these high-tech fabrics that are very comfortable. And so that's something to consider. But really, you can wear just about anything you want. I mentioned firearms briefly, and Deep will talk more about them in detail. Most guys that use dogs use shotguns. There's applications for both, but the reason they use shotguns are sometimes the squirrel will get nervous and it will break and it will make a run for it. And the guys with shotguns have a much better chance of getting that squirrel. The guys with 22s, just watch them run away. But you can use either. Let me say something about gear, because if you look at that, you may say, oh man, I don't want to buy all that junk. First thing I want to do is say that you can do this with an orange hat and a gun. And that's really all you need. Now, having said that, there's something about human nature that when you get into something, you eventually go down the gear hole. And I'm guilty of it. I'm not as bad as some, but I'm worse than others. And you see this in anything, even a basketball player, they're just happy to be throwing a ball at a hoop for a while. And you go down the road a year and they want the best shoes and the fanciest shorts. And hunters can do the same thing. And a lot of dog hunters, they choose to equip their dogs with a GPS unit. It's not required, especially for close working dogs. And as far as clothes, it'll largely depend, or footwear, for example, depend on the terrain. Are you walking in mountains? Are you going through swamp bottoms? This would determine if you chose a hiking boot or a knee-high rubber boot. But I do want to say with the gear, it's real easy to get turned off by looking at too much gear. So I would not get caught up on the gear, at least initially. And I just want to say that for me, squirrel hunting as a young man, it was an escape. It was something I could come home from a day of school, and if I was stressed out or if I had things going on in my life and I just wanted to go sit and be still and enjoy the woods, it was a time for that. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's a wonderful time to get together with friends and to have a social hunt that doesn't have quite the stress on it. And of course, you get lean, organic, high quality protein for your efforts. And so I would just say this, regardless of which way you go about it, whatever tack you take when it comes to hunting, that you make time for it and get out there and enjoy the resources that we have. Squirrels have got to be one of the most underutilized natural resources that we have in North Carolina, and it's just a fantastic opportunity. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deep.
Okay, thank you very much, Rupert. And that was a pile of squirrel tails. I will say that. Now, was that an entire season or?
Yes, that was a season when I was training a couple of young dogs. And so we went at it a little extra hard that year.
That was awesome. Thank you, Rupert. Great job. So my days of yore hunt, and I call it days of yours because I was one of those that, well, I was a cradle hunter, started out 12 years old in Pennsylvania, 1972, and squirrels were king to us. Squirrels were like a deer hunt. I wasn't even thinking about deer. In fact, I wasn't, even though I was introduced to deer at 13, we just loved small game hunting. And that included squirrels, rabbits, and pheasants at the time, which is an exotic. A pheasant's an exotic, but squirrels were king, and we took it like it was a deer hunt. So my hunt never had dogs. So it was approach, sit and wait, no tree stand or blind, didn't even have any gear. I don't even think I had a bottle of water, and we would hunt the mornings, me, my brother, and my dad, and just wait. And we always killed a couple of squirrels. My dad was usually first one to shoot. But again, I would sit, We'd go in just at twilight, so it wasn't even before dark. Now like the crazy deer and turkey hunts where I'm out there an hour before it started. Much more relaxed, but still intense. Crepuscular was always preferred, although we did hunt after schools. Sometimes I usually preferred hunting in the morning. Use binoculars, but rarely, especially back then. Now I do more though, especially look for acorns and things like that. I'd just be sitting there. I'd scan the treetops, the ground, listen for limb shaking, rustling. That was, kind of the things you hear when you're deer hunting, but now you're really looking for squirrels. May use calls. I had one squirrel call, and of course now I have a bunch of squirrel calls, mostly for teaching purposes, but was never really effective, nor did I really know how to use it until I watched those VHS tapes. I usually do put harvested squirrels to memory because I discovered pretty quickly that after, as Rupert mentioned about shotguns, we really mostly hunted with shotguns. And once that shotgun blast rattled, it was at least 15 minutes to a half hour before you saw another squirrel. So after the blast, though, if you got up and moved, you gave yourself away. Whereas if you stayed put, there's like, well, wow, was that thunder or whatever, So I think it helped. I'll relocate and scout if no activity, and this is even things I do today. Will gut and may process prior to leaving area rather than, taking them home. But on a cool day, I don't mind taking them home with the guts in, but I won't litter. I won't open them up and leave the hides and the carcasses and the guts on the roads or at the parking lot. Folks, you just don't do that. Get away from that. We don't want to look bad. And it's actually littering. So some clothing, much more relaxed for me than some of my deer gear, and usually much lighter as well. Sometimes I'll go in just a pair of coveralls like that. It's typically during a warm time, unless it's later in the year, then I'll dress maybe with some base layers. Like typically there you can see like a shirt, a hoodie, jacket, some pants, of the old traditional cotton poly twills. I'll sometimes have full finger gloves. I do like the military gloves that I can cut the tips off, still keeps your hands warm, meaning wool gloves. Sometimes the gloves with flaps. Typically have a handkerchief, always have a hat, sometimes the ball cap, but usually a sock if it's cooler. And of course, always a base layer with my socks, which are usually wool. Then obviously, if you're in a swampy area, rubber boots or the muck boots work out great. I will use the head netting to cover the face, usually with my eyes cut out. But if there's a lot of mosquitoes, typically like in season, I'll use what I call the bag over the head netting, that it just kind of cinches around your neck. I have a Thermacell. I just don't use it a lot because I'm usually hunting later season. And obviously a shorter boot I'll wear if I'm not doing a lot of climbing, or one with ankle support, like the higher boot here, if I'm climbing in ridge tops, or sometimes even a field boot. I do tend to collect gear, but then again, I'm unsupervised, so it's very easy to do. But you don't, like Rupert said, you don't need a lot of stuff. This for me represents tradition. These type of vests, game vests that had the bags in the back where you would put your squirrels or your rabbits or your pheasant in, were always popular when I was growing up. You can still find them sometimes in the whole coat. It typically has that brown canvas looking material with the orange patches on it, and the canvas patches on the pants that also had these brush guards. Speaking in terms of dogs, I was a dog. I would be the one going in the weeds, while usually family members would be outside. I couldn't get enough of it. So maybe I have some dog blood in me. I don't know. A little bit more gear, but not stuff that I really carry all the time. It's kind of pre-prep stuff. For example, I'll usually leave a processing kit with shears in the vehicle, and the shears are easier for cutting the legs of the squirrel off, even though you can easily snap them with your fingers, or even when you're cutting up through the chest cavity there. So I'll have that at the truck. I am a big fan nowadays because of chiggers and ticks. I do like the permethrin on the clothing, spraying it down, and of course do use the off repellents, especially for ticks and chiggers. I will sometimes carry the moleskin padding, especially if I'm walking long distances. Get a heel blister. I will carry some Band-Aids, Obviously, that's my hunting license wall, little knife for notching my big game tag, which you don't need to do for squirrel. No big game tag for squirrel. Always have a journal. I'm always writing in about my hunting experiences. Handheld GPS, still a big fan of. Will sometimes carry a regular GPS. Always got to have my coffee, no matter on what I'm doing, unless it's just a short afternoon hunt, then I won't carry that. You can never carry enough water. I always carry about a liter. Always something to eat. The ammo that's preferred by my given gun, and the guns, just like with a turkey gun or a rifle, it will sometimes prefer one type of ammo over another. So trying different forms is a good idea. Obviously, tissues can be used for a lot of things. Food. This little handy pack that I carry the squirrel calls in. Again, they're mostly teaching calls. You'll see them in a second again. And of course, got to have a phone case. That's a distress call. A little pair of snips for maybe branches that are in front of me. So again, not a ton of stuff. Oh, and binoculars, you know, for scanning at the trees. Always have a special watch for hunting, a little flashlight, and a headlamp, which is hiding under here for when I'm going into pre-darkness. So for me, when it comes to squirrel calls, mostly these bellows type calls that also have this little distress call whistle on them. I do play around with them. Again, there's tons of videos that'll teach you those different calls that I talked about, like barks, chatters, squeals, distress whistles, things like that. And obviously things like a hawk call or a crow call can alarm squirrels into giving away. You know, you become that intruding predator. And that can work sometimes to get a vocalization, and then maybe the squirrel call to call them in, or you can sneak up closer into a stalk to try to get close to them. These are a little bit different. They're cutter calls. And really, this is, you know, with me being a retail therapist, it's easy for me to buy something. And I thought, yeah, it's a good educational tool for like the GSO workshops. It's like a spool from thread with this threaded rod on it, and you take this little piece of plastic and you scrape it on that, and that does imitate the sound of a squirrel cutting. Well, this one was even more humorous. It was on eBay, and it's actually a plumbing device, a coupler, and they also took a squirrel call, one of those little round ones that was, oops, wanted to go backwards. That was right here, this little squirrel whistle, and they embedded it in there. So it was two calls in one, a cutter and a distress call. And I even called them up and told them, I said, hey, you're missing a little plastic thing. I guess you expect people to use your fingernail or whatever. So he said he would take that into account. And I basically just broke off a plastic screw. But again, it sounds like the cutting sound. And if squirrels hear something cutting, a squirrel cutting, then there's food. And then there's, of course, this one, that if you rub two quarters together, and if you're a squirrel hunter and you're watching this, you already know that. Rub those edges together, and it also makes a cutting sound, and it only costs 50 cents. So there you go, and you can use it again. I do like a little bit of comfort. This happens to be a trophy chair that's comfortable. The only one that makes it now is River's Edge, but you got little arm rails and everything. It weighs about 8-10 pounds. If I'm sitting for a while, I like that. Maybe a turkey chair. I'll typically sometimes carry a shooting stick for a more accurate shot. Just a simple pad to sit on. I'll carry a fanny pack sometimes, or maybe a backpack with the stuff in. Doesn't take a lot. Turkey seat works well. And even these porter roof umbrellas that are usually used for attaching to a tree. If it's a drizzly day and you want on squirrels, tie it up behind you when you're sitting down and keeps you dry. So again, a little bit of comfort and retail therapy. These are typically guns I use. That's a 22 semi. That's a semi. That's a bolt that's really accurate with that, with a specific type of ammo you'll see in a moment. That's also a bolt action that I've had forever, mint condition. And here's just a cheap Savage that'll do it all. It shoots real tight, just as accurate as, like, say, these two here higher end guns. Now, I will go on to say, just besides the gun, the Rifle Pro is obviously a low report. Not allowed as blast as a shotgun, so less spooking for squirrels and a longer effective range. But the Rifle Con is not for moving squirrels, as Rupert pointed out, and also shooting in canopy risk, especially with a rifle. And we're going to bring that up again in a moment. The 22 has gone through a big evolution. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it started out as a short round, still exists. low power, a long, what was referred to as a long rifle, then a 17, I think it was referred to as the Mach 1 or whatever. Some people use them, I don't. And this 17 HMR. And both of these were based on the 22 Magnum round, which Winchester brought out, which is really way too powerful for squirrels, overkill. And these basically put a smaller bullet in on, almost make it look like a rifle bullet. Some people use these, some people love them, but they do decapitate squirrels. It's like a 20-25 grain bullet, sizzling velocities. And again, overkill, unnecessary. I don't know, they're probably more expensive than 22s. But anyway, most common round is this round, the 22 long rifle. So some of them that, just to mention, there's a 22 long rifle compared to a 22 Magnum. As you can see, it's much bigger. You do not need it. You don't want to be using these. That's a bird shot. They still make them. It's got tiny 12 shot in it. They typically call it a pest round, but it's not designed for squirrels. And as I indicated, too much gun. Can you use it? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it will extend the range. You're trying to shoot a squirrel at 100 yards, but believe me, a squirrel at 100 yards is tough. And so very small target. So these are some different types of ammo I use, and I category it into a standard or target round. These tend to shoot the most accurate. In fact, in this one, this subsonic round in that stainless 77 Ruger will shoot one-holers at 50 yards. And so getting your rifle just by trying some different ammo, you know, if you have friends that like to do some shooting, try them out and see what shoots best in your gun. Green tag's another good one. Again, there's lots of them out there. The target, standard velocity. Then there's the typical high velocity. That would be in this category. Shoots well in most, a little bit more velocity. Try them. And then there's what we refer to as the hyper velocity. These have been out a long time. Stinger's been popular. This one, they tend to not shoot as accurate, but I will say this round right here, the Velocitor, shoots really good in that Ruger Semi. And so finding the right load. This one I haven't even tried yet, but I'm excited about trying it. I shared it with Rupert even in an email, hoping maybe he'll buy some because I am a retail therapist. That's a sizzling 1,700 feet per second, 22 round, which is unreal. It's a 30 grain bullet, but it's said to shoot accurately. Do you need it? No. Anyone that works in your gun is good enough. Shotguns, just a bunch that I use. There's two vintage 870s and in mint condition that I've used for small game for years. Plain Savage 20 gauge makes an excellent squirrel gun. Here's a Days of Yore thing, these over and under shotgun combo guns. This happens to be a 22 rifle 410 over and under. You only get one shot, but you kind of have that shotgun rifle advantage. Some people do try to top them with scopes. 410 isn't the best squirrel gun. It's a limited range squirrel gun, about 20-25 yards with the right load. It does work. And you can even use, like, say, your turkey gun. But what I will say with any shotgun, a full choke, even though most use modified, a full is better in my opinion, because if I'm shooting a squirrel, especially a sitting squirrel, I want the concentration of pellets mostly at the front of them and not all over them. But then if you're shooting at running squirrels, a little bit more open choke like modified is better for hitting them. You don't really need improved cylinder. So getting on to the Shotgun Pro, effective on moving squirrels, less risk danger of shooting in the canopy, as Rupert pointed out. Shotgun Con, it is loud and typically does spook, but you know, they do relax, but it is restricted to shorter effective range too. We want a quick, clean kill. So with that, it's a big double-edged sword, folks. If you're going to shoot at squirrels in the canopy safely, it should be this one on the left because you've got a tree backstop. When you're doing this, and if you miss that squirrel, or even if you don't, with development what it is, and even in rural areas are starting to be built up, you don't know where that bullet's going to go. And if you're on anything like a 30, 40, 45 degree angle, that can go a very far distance and you can't call that shot back. We often hear in the news every time Memorial Day or 4th of July, you know, celebratory fire. It's almost the same thing. So I would be safe and do it the right way. If you're using a rifle, try to get them on the ground, try to get the backstop. Bottom line. On most ammo, boxes. It even has suggestions, you know, what types of shot, and this was when you could use lead for ducks and geese. I have some of these archaic rounds, duck and pheasant load it was called, which you don't see that now. It's all has to be non-toxic. But you go down to squirrels, high power field game load, 4, 5, and 6 have been the most common for shooting squirrels. And some will just say 4 and 6. So it depends, but most shotgun boxes have it written. And here's one, even a federal box, not that old, that'll give you all the different gauges and the maximum effective distance, and even the choke suggestions. And again, rabbit and squirrel, 4, 5, 6, 7.5, 4, 5, 6, depending on the load. So, you know, there you have it. You already have some suggestions, but by and large, with most shotguns, 4, 5, and 6 lead is good. And if you have the money and you want to use non-toxic, but I don't know anybody that's going to use tungsten for squirrels. Here's just some ammo I pulled from my archives. Again, a number 6 shot in a 20, 4 shot in a 410, but there's not a lot of BBs in there. So that's definitely a close range shot. And we see it up here, the 410, the 20 gauge, much smaller shell. And here's some of that old duck and pheasant or high power 6s and 4s. And this very archaic box of 25 rounds from the 1970s, $4.86 on sale. You don't see that anymore. That's classic. The most common shotgun rounds, as we said, and readily available, a 410, a 20 gauge, and a 12 gauge. They are the most common. These others, like the 10 gauge, not so common. You're starting to see more 16 gauge, and you're starting to see more 28 gauge, especially in the turkey loads. But yeah, so they're kind of making a rebound. But again, you're probably going to pay for them too. So, you know, it's up to you what you choose. There's a lot, but you can't go wrong with a 20 gauge, even overall. And many people still use the 12. Absolutely pattern the shotgun sight in the rifle. As you can see here with a squirrel target, yeah, you got a bullseye, but the pellets are all over the place. So what I say is if you're not going to be shooting a lot of moving targets, yeah, tighter to choke's better. You concentrate them all in one area. But even so, after that squirrel gets out 20, 25 yards, they're going to be all over anyway. So maybe go with a larger pellet. You'll have less, but of course, you'll want enough for a quick, clean kill, which means in the head and in the vital kind of region. And then rifle, headshot, chest shot. And I will typically always try to take that headshot with a rifle. This, folks, is not a squirrel gun. I've seen these on YouTube, these squirrel challenges. It aggravates me. That's not adequate, not lethal, and not ethical. Air guns all are on the upswing for hunting, and I get it. But here's a situation where our Master Officer Eric Gleason got a squirrel, and he discovered that there was a BB in that squirrel's rump. Getting back to the point I made from the beginning, these animals are not simply targets for our amusement. We want a quick, clean kill. So a Daisy BB gun is not a squirrel gun. And in reality, if that's something you're interested in, I found this on the Meat Eater. A Daisy Red Ryder BB gun, as you can see, 350 feet per second. And the minimum suggested velocity is 800 to 1,000 feet per second. So if this is your route, if you're interested in this, low noise, air, do it right, do it ethically. Obviously, there's archery equipment. That is also an opportunity for people like that. And now, of course, there's a sling bow. That is a legal hunting implement. I wouldn't use it, but it is legal and it can be effective. Typically for small game, it's not a razor head, because if you do, that's going through and going to stick the squirrel at a tree or wherever. But it's typically things that will either do a lot of damage initially, like something like this, or kind of like a blunt force trauma, like some of these tips. It'll get in there, but it'll also concussion, very powerful damage to the squirrel. So, and of course, you don't lose the arrow either. Squirrel processing, a brief virtual journey. And this is a picture of how I've done it back in the day. And of course, some people do it differently. Of course, there's a ton of YouTubes out there that will give you an idea of how they do it. Some do it from the tail end. I know Rupert does, but I saw this imaging and I think it works good. So all you need is a knife, game shears, gloves, salt water for soaking. It's optional. You're going to see something about that, but I thought it was important. And one thing's for sure, a squirrel is easier to drag out. And you can drag out at least 6 of them, 8 of them at a time, your limit. So there you got a squirrel and a knife. You're all ready to go. As what I did in the day, and I would gut it first. This one doesn't look like it was gutted first, and that's okay. You would cut all the way around that center. So from the belly all the way around the back. Then after that, you would basically peel that entire hide back on that squirrel all the way back. Then you would take at each of those joints where you can see right near the foot, you would either use the game shears or even the knife, or they're fairly easy to snap. And then you would have basically a squirrel that looks like that. All the guts are out, cleaned up. That one even looks like it's been washed. You cut it into the morsel pieces and boom, you have a squirrel that's ready for the fryer, ready for the Instapot, which by the way, I love. I'm really liking my Instapot, the stew or whatever. This was a recipe that I saw online, not so much for the recipe, because as you'll see, there are so many of them, but for something else in particular. And I think you'll like this. So for example, how to make squirrel tender on that tender squirrel stew. And I'll just hit these bold ones here because it's interesting, and you'll be able to watch this in the recordings when you get it in about 2 weeks. Salt water helps flavor the meat from the inside out while also denaturing or break down proteins in the meat. I thought that was awesome for people, because squirrels are like mini Arnold Schwarzeneggers. They're really tough. And, but cooking and crock pots and sauteing helps. Well, the next wing, soak the squirrel meat in vinegar water solution. Acid in the vinegar helps to weaken collagen, stuff that connects muscles and bones together, and weaken protein the meat, another form of tenderization. So awesome. I mean, right there you have it. And there's no doubt there's more of that. You'll be able to see it again and try it. I typically do not do this. I just do it straight up and it's fine for me. I was given teeth, I use them, but everything doesn't have to be mush. But if this introduced it in a better way to someone that's curious about trying it, then it's the good way to go. I don't put squirrel recipes out there because as you can see, all I did was a Google and look what I got. 7,420,000 squirrel recipes. So I would bet almost anybody could find one that they liked. This is an excellent website. I found it a number of years ago. This person's name is Nate. Squirrel Hunting Journal. Google it. And he has videos. He has information about guns. He's the squirrel hunting guru, as it says here. As you can see, the site at all is about my absolute favorite topic and pastime. He's from North Carolina. You can see the plate. He's a squirrel hunting fanatic. So I suggest you do check that out. With that, and wow, we're like a minute or two off. It is time for Q&A. So, is this about squirrels hunting or humans hunting them? A combination of both squirrel hunting and humans hunting. So I'm not sure. Guys, do you have a comment on that one?
No, I think that as long as they watched the webinar, I think that probably would have answered that for them.
Yeah, and obviously squirrels do hunting if you think in terms of bird eggs and insects and even robbing birds' nests. So I guess they do some of them. So do fox and red squirrels have different habitats or respond differently to calls than grays? Not a big fox squirrel hunter. So any comments from you gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll chime in on both of those. So red squirrels are, well, they're truly a Western squirrel. In North Carolina, they're a Southern Appalachian squirrel, and generally you only see them at higher elevations. I'm going to say getting close to 3,000 feet and up. They are more of a pine squirrel, although you'll see them sometimes in like apple orchards or walnut groves. And in fact, just last week, I saw one cutting up buckeyes from a yellow buckeye tree. I didn't even know that they did that. Fox squirrels are also a pine squirrel. The part of North Carolina that's the most known for them is the sand hills because of the large number and many acres of mature longleaf pine. But that's not the only place you find them. In fact, their range has been expanding And anywhere that you have mature pines with some mix of hardwoods, I think you'll find fox squirrels. Did that answer that question?
Awesome. Yeah. Anything to add, Eric?
No, sir.
Okay, yeah, because what we'll do here, I'm going to let you guys handle the hunting and I'll take a break because, I talk too much already. But yeah, I figure how you can always do is just roll with it back and forth and we'll start by taking turns. So RE shotgun, 870 Remington 12 gauge. What size shot? Eric, you can start with that and Rupert can add anything if he wants.
Yeah, I think that was covered pretty well. I personally hunt with a 22, but I think anything from as large as size 6 up to size 8 would probably be perfectly adequate.
Okay, Rupert, you have anything to add?
I think that's about right. I have a preference for size 6 myself.
Okay. Okay, he is on it now. Okay, not sure what that one is. We'll move on. Is there an easy way to remove lead pellets to ensure we don't ingest lead? And feel free, Rupert, if you want to take that one first.
Yeah, you pick them out of your teeth. No, that's not the answer you want. And certainly when you shoot a squirrel, lead pellets in particular, like I said, I use 6-shot. The 6-shot will usually go in the hide through the meat, and often it hangs in the hide on the back side. But every once in a while, a pellet will get stuck, in particular up against a bone like the pelvis or something along those lines. And I said it as a joke, but you do sometimes find them as you're eating. But I think just by cleaning the squirrels and being diligent in the cleaning process, you probably get most of them that way.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add there, Eric?
The most effective way is use a 22.
There you go. There you go. And if you do see, and I'll just add, because I've done this many a times, even with turkey meat, is when you see a hole, cut it with a knife and go dig it out. And then you won't have to worry about that if it is in the flesh. So that way you just slice into where the hole is. Yeah. Do I need to worry about any parasite in a squirrel? Eric, your thoughts?
I would say that's probably best directed to our biologist.
Okay. Rupert?
I don't think so. I will say this, as far as a human health, and by the way, I'm not a doctor. I can't really speak to human health issues, but Deep mentioned squirrel pox and the warbles, or I grew up calling them wolves. And the wolves are an ectoparasite that comes off with skin, and the squirrel pox is exceedingly rare. I've only seen it a couple times, and both times was because I was the biologist on call when somebody detected the disease. I doubt you'll even run into that. The one thing that I would issue a little bit of caution on, and most of you probably wouldn't even consider this, but where I grew up in the Southern Appalachians, some of the old timers would eat the squirrel brains. And while I can't speak to it with any degree of expertise, I am aware that there is a very rare cognitive illness that is potentially related to the eating of squirrel brains. I think it's a general rule of thumb that you shouldn't eat brains of almost anything. Other than that, I don't think you have much to worry about.
There you go. Okay. Do you find squirrels in cedar thickets?
I'll jump in on that. I would say the answer is definitely yes, but it's not, Deet showed slides of good habitat. The cedar thickets are places that squirrels prefer to put their nests or leaf nests, drays, whatever you prefer to call them. And they'll strip the bark from cedars and they'll use that as nesting material. I don't know that they actually eat the fruits from cedars very much. I think it's just a shelter wood for them.
Okay. Do you see any people who use a muzzle loader for squirrel hunting? I think the main caliber was 32 or 36 in the past. TC used to make a traditional side lock in these calibers. I have not. Eric, have you?
I have seen one person in 10 years of working using a muzzleloader for small game, and it was a firearm that he had inherited from a grandfather or great grandfather that had passed away and was using it, largely for sentimental purposes. But it exists and it is legal. So it's up to you if you would choose to use that.
Yeah. Rupert, have you ever seen that?
Actually, I took somebody squirrel hunting with dogs. It's one of our fellow coworkers. It's Greg Queen, and he brought a muzzleloader one time, but it was not a 32 caliber. It was a muzzleloading shotgun, and so he was actually packing it with a little pack of shot, and so it was probably something along the lines of 6 shot. And he harvested some squirrels that way. Certainly, most people don't go that route, but if you're an enthusiast, there's definitely a way to fit it in.
Okay, and definitely there was the colonists surely did it. Are scent and wind direction something to consider when squirrel hunting like it is with deer? Gentlemen, feel free.
No, as far as a squirrel smelling you, I don't think that's really an issue. Now, mentioning wind, squirrels, they don't move as well in windy conditions. They just don't like it as much. I think because the limbs are moving and leaves are shaking and they can't detect predators as well, but not from a human scent type of concern.
Which of the squirrels is called the boomer? Maybe that's a biology one. Rupert, what do you think? I don't know. I don't think I ever heard that.
Yeah, that's some people call the red squirrel a boomer, and I grew up hearing that as well. And that is a game animal. You can hunt them. They're pretty small, and it's only in certain regions that people refer to them as boomers, and I don't know why that is.
Okay, how often before dawn or dusk would you recommend getting at a spot? How long to wait at typically one spot? Eric?
I think it's just up to you. They move primarily at dawn and dusk. So if I am going out with the intention of squirrel hunting, I try to get out there before the squirrel really starts moving and getting down from the trees. So right at daylight or a few minutes before. And when I'm squirrel hunting, I enjoy walking and moving. I like being a little bit more mobile. So I'll sit for sometimes 15 minutes. Sometimes I'll bring a book and I'll sit there and I'll read for an hour and move on. It's up to you. If you want to cover a lot of ground in the morning or in the evening while they're at their peak time of moving, then you could sit for a few minutes and move, sit for a few minutes and move. It's the beauty of squirrels is it's typically you're going to see some squirrels in different areas. You're going to see more animals, maybe have more shot opportunities than you would with deer. And a lot of that's just going to come down to personal preference and how you learn where you have the most success and how you most enjoy it, because that's really the main thing.
Hey, and I remember, Rupert, you're going to have to add this because it was very unique, the story you told about when you go out when dog hunting. So share that.
Yeah, so one of the differences with hunting with dogs is especially if you use dogs that are keen to use their nose rather than their eyes and ears, and that's my preference. We actually will go a little later. We'll let the squirrels come down and scurry about and lay down scent trails so that the dogs have something to work with from the time you turn loose.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Okay, I'm a doctor and no brains agreed due to risk of prion disease. So yes, absolutely. Prion, what is the better word? I'm not sure. I kind of say them both back and forth. Yep, and we have a website there. Thank you for that. While deer hunting, I see squirrels all around the feeders or corn piles. Is it legal to hunt around these after deer season ends? Eric, we know that's yours.
It is legal to hunt squirrels with the use of bait on private land. You cannot use any kind of bait on public land, but as long as you are hunting private land, if you would like to put out corn for squirrels or go hunt underneath your deer feeders after the deer season, that is perfectly fine.
And obviously I'm playing devil's advocate here, but with that spring season, that's later, if that coincides with turkey season, that would be an issue, right?
Fortunately, it does not coincide with turkey season, but
Okay.
that is correct. This isn't the turkey webinar, but you cannot hunt turkeys with the use of native bait, period, and all bait if you are baiting before the season, or if you like to run corn for deer year round. All bait, meaning every individual grain of bait has to be completely gone from an area for 10 days before the area is considered not baited.
Okay, is using ground blinds okay on game land, Eric?
Yes, it is. There, you cannot construct any permanent blinds or stands, so don't put any nails in trees or anything like that. But you can use a pop-up blind if you so choose.
Okay, if one has success hunting squirrels in one area, should you wait a few days or weeks before hunting that area again? What's your thought, Rupert?
That's something that I've struggled with, because with a dog, if you go on a day when they're really moving good, you might can kill two limits in a morning, and I'm always struggling. Maybe I shouldn't go back there because I've already harvested several squirrels from that area, and that's often my approach. Sometimes I'll hit a place one time in a year, but I've talked to other guys that are avid hunters, and they've kind of laughed at me for that and say it's a little bit silly. There are studies that have been done that show that hunting pressure is not a limiting factor on squirrel populations. So I'm going to say, from a biological perspective, you can continue hunting there. These studies show that if squirrel populations get low enough, people will quit hunting, but that's not at a level that's so low that those squirrel populations won't immediately rebound. I think I said that in a way that makes sense, but if you like a spot, you can keep hunting it.
There you go. Good information. Yeah, here's one. Do I have to report my harvest limit each day, Eric?
Not for squirrels, nope. The only thing that you have to report are your big game species in North Carolina. So bear, deer, and turkey.
Okay. Well, right now, we just had one pop up. Okay. Okay, this is very informative. Something to do after deer in January, February, then get ready for turkey April, May. What fun. Yes, yes, indeed. Well, if it gets folks participating more, that's the intent, because we although relatively stable in North Carolina, we're still represent a smaller proportion. So yep, the idea is to get out when you can. Right, guys?
Absolutely.
Okay, I think I'm seeing another one. If hunting at the same time as deer hunters, how can I best be courteous and safe around them? Thoughts, guys? Maybe both?
Sure. So I'll always make sure you are wearing your hunter orange, right? If you see somebody at the gate when you show up to public land and they're going in the deer hunt, have a conversation with them, see where they're going, and if they got there first, go a different direction. Theoretically, they should be wearing their hunter orange. If you see them from a long ways off, keep a wide berth and stay away from them. Obviously, if you're hunting public land, there is a possibility of happening upon another hunter. It's a good idea to think about maybe being a little bit less mobile if you're on public land during the deer season and you're worried about walking up on somebody else that's hunting. All things to consider, just remember that you are sharing that public land with other people who are using it lawfully, and just being respectful and courteous of the people that are there and using that land just like you are. Remember that nobody owns a spot on public land. If somebody beats you to a location that you are planning on going, well, then show up earlier next time. Be respectful and concede that spot to whoever got there first.
Very good advice. Anything to add, Rupert, on your strategy?
I think that was pretty perfectly answered. I will say that with a dog that covers a lot of ground and is very mobile, that everything that you just heard is even more magnified, because the dog barking, even if it's a couple hundred yards away, can be very disturbing. So it's just best to, if you're squirrel hunting and there are deer hunters in the woods, to give lots of space to the deer hunters.
Good advice. Okay, we don't have any questions now, so we're gonna wait maybe about 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and well, we have one up now. How do you hunt squirrels legally from a boat while floating down the river? I think you can't use a motor while hunting, trolling motor or gas, Eric.
Yeah, you can float down the river with your kayak or whatever you'd like to use, canoe or something like that. You cannot hunt while under power, but yep, you can float along and hunt to your heart's desire.
Yeah, and I've actually never done that, but I guess it can be really effective. Any of you gentlemen do that, float hunt?
I do not. I have talked to some people that are doing it on our rivers here in Western North Carolina, and all of them report just how difficult it is to accurately shoot a 22 in a kayak. While it is, even with no waves, it still does have quite a tendency to bounce a little bit.
So it sounds like a shotgun affair.
I would say so. And keep in mind as well, this is very important to keep in mind, if you are hunting from a boat and there's private land on either side of you, if that squirrel falls on private land, you do not have a right to retrieve that animal. If it's on private land, you need that landowner's permission to enter that property. So it probably would not be a good idea to float a river if it's private land on either side, because you're only going to put yourself in a bind. You're going to have harvested an animal that you have a ethical responsibility to do everything in your power to retrieve. And if it's fallen on private land that you don't have permission to go onto and retrieve it, then it puts you in a legal and ethical bind. So it's something to certainly consider if you're going to hunt from the water.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay. Again, we'll give it about a minute yet. No questions. We're going to wrap up for tonight, folks. Hope you did enjoy it. And obviously, while we're just waiting here for a few seconds, if there's any final comments from our speakers, from our panelists, feel free.
No, I think you did a great job, both of you. The only thing that I would add is with the subsonic rounds that Deep mentioned. I don't have much experience with those, but I have heard that the subsonic rounds do not always cycle in semi-automatic 22s, and they can cause jams and some other issues with jamming. So just something to maybe test out, or we'll get on some forums and look at if you're using a semi-automatic before you go buy the subsonics.
Yeah, because typically and that's true, typically I'm using them in a bolt action and you wouldn't have that issue there. Okay, somebody said thank you. You're very welcome. Do you prefer solid bullet or hollow points? Gentlemen, any preference?
I prefer whichever one shoots the best, honestly.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. Okay, and thanks for the kind words. And again, folks, just letting you know too, that as soon as I get these recordings, I will distribute them. And like I said, it could be up to 2 weeks, but you will get them as long as you're in that registration list. Okay, and also we'll just add, while we're going to wrap up here and leave for the night, if you are interested again in the remaining webinars and or the GSO workshops for the new hunters, drop me that email at gso@ncwildlife.org. We hope to see you again, because we do have 2 waterfowl and an upland game webinar coming up, and as well as a deer hunting workshop and upland hunting workshop as well. So you're all, thank you very much. And you will have a post webinar survey, and we do ask that you fill that out. You'll see the link. That helps us to continually improve the webinars. So with that, I am going to say good luck out there. Be safe. We hope to see you again soon. Be ethical and be respectful to others in the woods and have a great time. That's what we're out there for, and to get some free range protein, which we all enjoy. So everyone have a good night. And I want to thank my panelists again, Rupert and Eric, for assisting. As I often say, I'm usually a one-man band, can't do it without folks, and appreciate their support and their expertise. So everyone have a great night. Thanks for being with us.